What is going on? Welcome inside the Red Mile Rundown. I am your host, John Easto. Thank you so much for joining us as part of the Red Mile Rundown. And of course, alongside me, as always, from flamesnation.ca and on Twitter at @RingOfFireCGY, it's Robert Munich. How we doing, Robert?
There's nothing better than the May long weekend here in Alberta. Nothing better. You head outside and there's flurries and it's -1 and it's just miserable out here. So yeah, it's been a decent May long weekend, but could we at least get some sun? Could we get some warm? Like, oh my God, this is brutal.
It's funny because I live far enough south where I'm on the other side of the line. So I got all the wind in the world because, of course, I live in southern Alberta. All the wind in the world, all the clouds in the world, and we've gotten like maybe a millimeter of rain. I just like, it's crazy how different the weather can be just a couple hours apart from one another. But it is May long weekend. It's good to have. I love May long weekend. I love everyone freaking out about the weather on May long. It's like a tradition to have crappy weather, complain about it, and then we all enjoy our Tuesday through Thursday and get back to work. Robert, it is May. We did all of our report cards. We went through the roster and we chatted about this person and that player and this player. And it feels like it's been about 100 years since the draft lottery happened, and we still have draft to talk about and other things around the Calgary Flames. But where do you want to start on today's episode? Because the topics are getting thin here, and people are wondering what there is to talk about for the Flames. But let's nail some stuff down here. Let's talk about how the Flames have some things still to do this offseason, what we'd like to see them do. So why don't you go ahead and start here, Robert? What's the number one thing you think the Flames need to focus on this offseason, draft aside?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the first time in a long time that I can remember going into an offseason and there's no drama around the team. There's
so
no
quiet.
Question marks. There's no large pending UFAs and RFAs that they have to worry about. You know, this is like I said at the end of the season, this is the most stable the Calgary Flames have been in a long, long time. You know, maybe said the most since the lockout in 04, 05. There's not a whole lot going on, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing with where this team stands right now. So kind of with all that being said, I would say the number one off-season priority for me is just the idea that they need to remain patient and don't get ahead of yourselves, because they've done this in the past where, you know, in the summer of 2015, and granted, it was coming off, you know, winning a playoff round, but they were still in the beginning stages of their rebuild. You know, they go out and they make a big trade for Dougie Hamilton, and they go out and they sign Michael Frolik. Even in like the 2012 offseason where, you know, Jerome McGinley and Jay Bouwmeester, they were pending UFAs. It was obvious the Flames were going to have to go into a rebuild. You know, they went out and signed guys like Yuri Hoodler and Dennis Weidman, and, you know, it ended up working out for the 14-15 season. But like overall, like, was that really the type of move that the team should have been making at that point in time? So I would say, yeah, stay patient. Don't make a big trade. Don't sign a big free agent. I really believe that this team is going down the right direction. And I really believe that if they stay the course, if they remain patient, that, you know, things are going to work out and they will get out of this and they will end up building a legitimately good hockey team. And, you know, like I cover the Canucks for Canucks Army, and I was watching the Sedins and Ryan Johnson press conference, and Henrik Sedin had a great quote, because the Canucks are in the same position as the Flames right now. But he said, to do this as fast as possible, we need to be careful and go slow. I think that's the fastest way to get where we want to go. And I think that applies to the Flames as well as the Canucks. They have to go slow, stay on the rebuild, stay patient. Just don't do much this offseason. So I actually think that's the number one priority. It's probably a boring answer. We're not going to get any sort of fun news to dive into, but I think it's important for the future of this team. So that's kind of my first one. What's yours?
Just to feed off yours real quick here, I think that's really important as well, because like you've had 3 or 4 off seasons in a row here where it's been really loud around the Flames, lots of noise, lots of rumors, lots of things going on that they've had to deal with. They don't have anything to deal with this offseason except for the draft and maybe a Blake Coleman trade if they decide to go down that road. They've made the decision to go down the path. I like what you said there. Be patient, stick on the path. It's a really, really good one. And I think going along with that, it would be my first one is each of these players that are under the Flames umbrella need to have themselves a really good off season, really good summer. So for me, a player development view this summer is important for the Flames to stay the course with what they're trying to do in rebuild. And that means developing your players this offseason. I know people are like, what are you talking about, John? It's the offseason. Make sure these guys are doing their workout plans. Make sure these guys are following the plans laid out for them. Make sure these guys are dialed into what they need to do to have good summers. I think it's important for a lot of these younger players to come into camp ready to go, not use camp as a platform to start getting going. That guys like Perek and Kuznetsov need to come in ready to go to build on what they started last season. We saw a lot of ups and downs last season, a lot of growth last season. And I think it's important that the Flames continue to work that momentum into this rebuild, because that's how you can keep your rebuild going and strong and keep fans interested in your games, is have something to build upon. So for me, I think it's going to be a quiet summer news-wise, but it should be a very busy summer on the off workout days. Make sure that guys are getting their work in, their check-ins done. Make sure guys are following the plans laid out for them. I think it's important for the Flames to stick with it, which will help them stick to the plan. So for me, it's have a good summer, guys. Enjoy your summer, but also make sure that you put in the work for next season as well, because next season is going to be a tough one, but these players have to be prepared to dive in and put the work in to make sure they are successful individually, which will eventually lead us to some team success. So that's where I had number one here, Robert, is off season, work out, stick to your plan.
Yeah, I mean, if this team plans on getting any better next year, it's going to all come internally.
Yep.
And it's going to probably have to come, at the hands of the younger players on this team. Matt Vigridon's going to need to take a step forward and be a 50 to 60 point player. Once again, this is from a Flames perspective. They always want to be getting better. We as fans probably want them to tank next year again, but you do want to see progression. You want to see Honzig play all 84 games next year and maybe put up around 30 to 40 points. That would be big. You want Gridden to be in that 50 to 60 point range. Even a guy like Morgan Frost, you want him to step up now that he's going to have a full season away from Nazem Kadri, and he's going to have that opportunity to be the number one center for this team. You want him to have a big offseason. You want Coronado to be around a 25 to 30 goal guy, not an 18 goal guy. There's a lot of guys on this team who, they need to have a big summer if the Flames want to see some internal growth. And it's just important for their developments in getting the Flames to the position where they eventually want to be in 3 or 4 years, where they're kind of turning the corner and starting, having like a similar season to what the Sharks just had, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's not just the young players, the rookie players either trying to fight off sophomore slumps. Like you're talking, can Morgan Frost show that he is a top 2 center in the league? Can he capitalize on that opportunity? Can Blake Coleman continue to put forth the numbers so he shows that what he is worth? Can Michael Backlund fight off Father Time for another season? There's a lot of balls up in the air for a lot of these players here, and I love what you said there, Robert. If the Flames are going to get any better, it is going to be internally, and it's going to be on these players to do the work. And so I think it's really important for guys to make sure they're putting in the work here and making sure that it's you want to be good individually, and that's going to help you lead to have some team success here. So it's very important for me. So I like that as well. Where else are you going here, Robert?
The other big one for me is just the idea that Craig Conroy needs to move out a forward or two. I take a look at the lineup like as currently constructed, and in the top 9 I have guys like Honzig, Backlund, Coleman, Gridden, Frost, Coronado, Huberdeau, Strome, Farabee. And then that puts guys like Connor Zary, Yegor Sharangovich, Martin Pospisil, Adam Klapka, maybe even a guy like Adar Suniev. They're all on the outside looking into that top 9. And if guys like Zary, Sharangovich, and Suniev, if he makes the team, if those 3 guys in particular, if they're going to want to have success next season, they have to play in the top 9. They cannot play in the 4th line. They can't be healthy scratches. These guys need to play in offensive roles, and they need to play with other talented players. So, there are 2 bodies too many right now in the forward group, I would argue. So if I'm Craig Conroy this summer, obviously I'm shopping Blake Coleman. We talked about that last week. I think we both think that the best thing for the Flames and Coleman is to trade him this summer. So I look to move him out. And then, you look at other guys like, is with a rising salary cap and a lack of talent in the free agent pool, is there a team who struggles to score that might be willing to take on a guy like Yegor Sharangovich if the Flames maybe eat some money, or maybe they bring back another bad contract in the deal? Like, can you move out a guy like Sharangovich? I think the Flames are going to look to move Connor Zary. I still want to see him get an opportunity. Like, I still believe in the player, but I would understand if they'd look in the other direction to maybe trade him. And I throw even Martin Pospisil in there too. I don't know if any team is going to take him, since he's starting year one of a 3-year deal coming off an injury-plagued season, and knowing his injury past, I don't know if a team's willing to take those on. So I would say kind of shop those 4 guys: Coleman, Pospisil, Zary, Sharangovich. See if you can move out, at least 2 of them, and then that's going to allow some more spots to be available in the top 9 for some more skilled players. And then, another thing you have to keep in mind too is at the end of this upcoming season here, you're going to have guys like Wittenbach, Potter, Reshny. Mm-hmm. Likely all 3 of them are going to be signed out of the NCAA, and you're going to want to make room for those guys at the end of the season as well. So I think it's important that the Flames look to move out a couple forwards here.
Yeah, there's also Castagna and Gross that you gotta add into the equation too. What are they going to push for? There's lots of names out there. I'm with you, Robert. Lots of names there, and there's an opportunity for the Flames as well to take advantage of having such a gluttony of wingers to move out a guy like a Blake Coleman, or like you mentioned, maybe a Sharangovich. There's opportunities there for the Flames to make those moves. There's going to be a couple of upset teams. I'm thinking both Dallas and Minnesota are not going to like how their playoffs ended. You're going to look at other teams, maybe Edmonton or anyone else out west who had early exits. Like, there's a lot of teams out there that are going to look to capitalize on their situations. Does Montreal or Buffalo, when they lose tonight, are they going to look at, we got to do something to help push us over the edge? What about Detroit? Their mix, we talked about their mix out there. So there are teams out there with question marks. And the Flames, like you mentioned, with the free agent market being absolutely gross, there's an opportunity here for the Flames to maybe be that facilitator for a couple of teams here to take advantage. I like that one, Robert. I didn't even think of that one. So credit to you. My last one is a pretty obvious one, and that's why I left it for last, because it'll taper nicely into our second topic of the day. The Flames have to nail this draft. Absolutely nail this draft. And I'm not talking about pick 11 studs with their 11 picks. I'm talking about make sure you get your guy that you would want at the spots that you are drafting. Whether that means being aggressive with that Vegas pick and moving back up into the teens or the early 20s and picking a guy that you really targeted, whether that's packaging a bunch of players out so you get the Ruck twins, whatever your flavor might be. If you're Craig Conroy, make sure that you've put in the work, and I'm sure they are putting in that work to nail this draft. You're not going to get a no doubt franchise cornerstone at pick 6, but make sure that you have your list solidified, that you are happy and stoked for whoever's ever there at 6 for you, that you've done your research. Make sure that you have the ability to move around the draft, and use that ability to move around the draft with all of those draft picks and just absolutely nail this draft. And it could be beyond just picking players. It could be moving around draft picks, moving around to Blake Coleman, making the right trades to help facilitate other teams, and just taking advantage of the situation ahead for the Flames. This is an important offseason that way for Calgary, in my opinion, with the gluttony of picks that they have and the position that they put themselves in. Draft your best available guys and make sure that you nail this draft, because for me, this is going to help set the Flames up. They've done a lot of collecting assets. Now it's time to start paying those assets off by drafting properly and developing these players. So for me, nail this draft, Robert. Nail it good.
Yeah, I mean, they have 8 picks in the first 3 rounds of the draft. I mean,
ridiculous.
Over the next 10 years, like how many times is this organization going to have that type of draft pick ammunition, in their hands to use here? Like, they have to take advantage of that. And, it's crazy now that Las Vegas, I know they're going to protest this, but they have lost their second round pick for not doing media. All of a sudden, the Vancouver third round pick moves into the last pick in the second round. So you could almost say technically the Flames have 5 second round picks in this draft.
Jeez.
Which is unbelievable. So yeah, between the 2 firsts, we'll call it the 5 seconds and a third, and that the third that they own is also quite high in the third round. Like, they have to come away with at least 2 or 3 impact players. And like I'm talking guys who are going to be playing in the top 6 or who are going to be playing in your top 4 on defense. I think it's so critical that happens. And, how they go about it is completely up to them. But, if they want to use some of those picks to move up in the draft and maybe get 3 picks in the first round, and that's the way you're hoping to fill out those 2 or 3 difference makers, then great. Or if you use all the picks, then, that could be fine too. But just, you're right. They have to hit a home run in this draft. They have to find at least, I'll say 2 or 3, like, yes, really good hockey players, top 6 forwards, top 4 defensemen. I think it's so critical. And the other thing that I kind of worry about a little bit is, this ownership group has shown a tendency to either, one, not rebuild whatsoever, even though it's clear that the team does need to rebuild, or if they do go into the rebuild, like they did in 2013, that they rush out of it. So, I don't know how many other times the Flames are going to be in this position where they're truly in a rebuild. They're picking in the top 6. They have, 8 picks in the first 3 rounds at their disposal. I don't know how many times this is going to happen again. And, because I could totally see a world where, not next off season, but the following off season, year 1, going into year 1 in Scotia Place, I could see Murray Edwards saying, hey, Craig, pedal to the metal, get this team going here. And then all of a sudden, you're thinking that you're going to be picking high in the draft for 4 straight years. All of a sudden you pick high in the draft for 2. And then all of a sudden your rebuild is over because Murray Edwards wants to rush it. I could see that being a situation. So take advantage of this while you can. If you're Craig Conroy, you're officially in that rebuild situation. You have all these draft picks. You got to hit home runs, because if you don't hit home runs in this draft or next year's draft, I don't know if you're going to be able to do so in further drafts in the sense of picking high. So, yeah, I think, honestly, out of all the things we talked about so far for this offseason preview, what you just said there, John, is the most important. It's nailing this draft 100%.
Yeah, and it's got to be nailed with quality, like you've been mentioning there, Robert. And that was a really good way of laying it out. It's, you have 11 picks, and this is going to sound really weird to those who aren't really staunch hockey people. You can't pick 11 players. Use the draft to move up. Like, I know a lot of people are down on Tynan Lawrence, but what if he falls to the 18th, 19th pick? Can you be aggressive and move up the draft? And maybe he's a guy you target in that area. And you have a center that you really like. That's just assuming they like Tynan Lawrence, of course. That type of situation. Like, if the guy falls in the draft that you really like, go get him. Be aggressive. Spend the extra draft pick on him. You've done a really good job of accumulating all of these prospects we've had the last few drafts, all these draft picks through all these trades that we've made, or that Conroy has made here. Like, now is an opportunity for that to pay off a little bit for the Flames, because there's a buttload of them next year for the Flames as well. So you have the opportunity to continually fill these cupboards with, find some quality. A lot of people want to say use the Dallas model. Well, this is a good draft to try to use that Dallas model. And if you really want to go down that road, it's hard to duplicate what Dallas did in that draft when they got Ottinger and those guys. But you have an opportunity ahead here to really put some quality into your cupboards. And it starts with that pick 6, nailing pick number 6. Are you more of a, we'll just take what's left over guy, Robert, at pick 6, or are there guys that you actually want to target at 6 that could legitimately be there for the Flames if you're Craig Conroy? We talked about the cliffs, and many people see them fall off a lot of different ways. There's people that are like, well, it's 1 and 2, and then there's a cliff, and then it's 3 to 6 or 3 to 7, and there's a cliff. How do you view it from your reading and your research where that cliff is? And if you're the Flames, are you aggressive with pick 6, or are you happy with whoever falls to you at pick 6?
I think you're going to be pretty happy with whoever falls to you there. And, you talk about cliffs there, and I'd say there's, you have 1, 2, McKenna Stenberg, whatever way you want to go about it. And then there's a small cliff after that, and it's probably 2 players, Chase Reed and Caleb Malhotra. And then there's another cliff there. And then I feel like, players ranked 5 through 9, 5 through 10 are all pretty similar value. Whether it's a Vigio Bork who could potentially be a middle 6 or a top 6 center. That's a really interesting profile. And then on defense, you have 3 guys who I think could all become top pair defensemen one day. I guess you'd even throw 4 in there, whether it's Carson Karls, Keaton Verhoff, Daxon Rudolph, and Albert Smits. I think you'd be pretty happy to get really between Bork and then those 4 defensemen. I think if you're the Flames, you'd be pretty happy to get honestly any of those players. In terms of my personal opinion, where I want them to go, I like the idea of Carson Karls. I like the idea of a left shot, a guy who both is good defensively and has really good puck moving skills. He's a really good skater. He's got some nastiness to his game, and I like the character there too. It seems like he's like a really good kid, Western Canadian guy, cattle farmer, like all that, like Don Cherry old school hockey kind of stuff. I personally like that in him. I don't think you get that kind of profile of player that much these days. So, and he's come out and said publicly that he wants to play in Canada and he'd love to play in Calgary, which I think is awesome. And then, if you get Keaton Verhoff, then, you got your kind of right side defensive shutdown guy, maybe like your Aaron Ekblad type of player, to play in front of or behind Zane Parekh. I think that would be a home run win for the Flames. And then, I'm high on Daxon Rudolph. I think he's a stud. I put him in the same category as Verhoff and Karls. I noticed Rudolph has kind of been going in that like 8 to 12 range in a lot of mocks, but I could see a world where he could go up to 6. I really do. And then, Vigio Bork, everything I read is that he's just tenacious and he's not your prototypical smaller center. Like this guy works his ass off. He's not going to be pushed around. He's ultra aggressive. He's physical. And I love hearing that. So yeah, from my perspective, if you can get any of Karls, Bork, Verhoff, Rudolph, I think you're really happy if you're the Flames. And then hopefully over the next couple years beyond this, you're able to get some lottery luck. You can pick in the top 3 a couple times. Like that would be huge for this team. But yeah, I think you made a really good point, John. You said, you don't think they're going to get the franchise altering guy. I agree, but I do think you're going to get, a really good player, at 6 who's going to be an important part of your team, but maybe not that truly foundational piece.
Every team out there that wins a cup or is close to winning a Stanley Cup, they have that one guy that's beside their stud, whether they go trade for them or they draft for them. Like you look at the Nathan McKinnon, well, he's got Marty Necas beside him, right? Just rolling alongside of him. You look at those type of players, and I think that's what the Flames could be getting in this draft here with the guy at number 6, a guy who could be the guy beside the guy, whether that is, say it is Carson Karls, a guy who I'm really high on as well at number 6. What if he is the guy that goes beside Zane Parekh on a second pairing that helps lead your team? Like, what if that's the type of player you get? So you're not going to get your franchise-altering guy, but you're going to get someone who's going to be very important to your franchise with this pick here. And I think it's for the Flames, it's going to feel like they're settling for who's ever left over, but you better believe that they've done their research, that the guys that they have at number 6, the guy they put at number 6 on that list is because they're really high on that guy. And what if a guy does fall to them? What if it is Keaton Verhoff that falls to him? This was a guy who was, by all counts, was battling McKenna to start the season for the number 1 pick overall. People had him that high in certain spots when you're reading and you're doing your research, and it falls off a little bit. And so what if he falls to you number 6? That's a great pick. What if it is Albert Smits, guy who plays the left side, who's played with men for a year and a half now, a guy who can really move the puck and play a really good, hard-nosed defensive game? Or what if it is, and this is going to ruffle some feathers, what if it is Tynan Lawrence? What if they want to go out there and target a center and bring in a Tynan Lawrence? Yes, he had a tough time in the NCAA and adjusting to the NCAA, but before that, in the USHL, he was absolutely tearing through that league. So the trick here for me, or not the trick, the thing is for me is you just know the way that Conroy's drafted in the past and the way that his board is set up, that they've put in the work, and that we can rest assured that he is going to get his guy at number 6. And for me personally, I kind of hope it is Keaton Verhoff. I mentioned it on Locked On Flames podcast on Tuesday morning, where he was asking me about if I was still high on this player. And I'm like, absolutely. He's one of the younger players in the draft. He is a little bit more raw, but he's a guy who challenged himself by going to a different level of hockey after tearing through the WHL. Now he's in the NCAA, and he's playing against a league that's dominated by 21, 22-year-old players typically, and he's in there and he's working and honing his craft. So for me, I'd really like to see Keaton Verhoff be there, and I'm also a big fan of Carson Karls, like I mentioned. So for me, I don't think it's going to be Craig Conroy settling for who's ever left over. I think he's going to be quite happy with his list. And then within that list, maybe he can be aggressive to go get somebody else. He's really high on that list that has fallen from other players. Whether it could be anybody else on that list. Maybe it is I can't even think of a name off the top of my head here. Maybe even it is Wyatt Cullen who falls on their list, and you go get him later in the draft type of player. So I'm all for this draft. I'm all for drafting one of those defensemen as well, because I think you're going to have your pick of a few different defensemen. And I didn't mean to not talk about Daxon Rudolph, because I'm with you there, Robert. I think he's getting overlooked, much like he was overlooked in my answer just now. I think he's getting overlooked as a player that could be potentially in play at 6, because that kid is everything Carson Carroll's is, just on the other side of the ice, on the right side. So it's important to nail pick 6, and I'm excited to see where the Flames go here with it.
Yeah, like there's a couple of things that kind of come to mind there from what you were talking about. Like, I mentioned with Carson Carls that I like the idea that he's a left shot, because the Flames have Parekh, Brustevich, Muse on the right side already. But at the same time, if they do end up taking a Verhoff or Rudolph, right shot defenseman, it's also not a bad thing to just completely load up one side of your defense and basically the entire game. You know that you have a really good, solid defenseman on the ice at all times. Like, I know that's what Tampa Bay did when they were winning their cups. They had like Victor Hedman, Sergachev, and McDonough, I believe, all on the right side of their defense.
It was so good.
And then they just end up putting, solid, defensive defensemen alongside them. And then you just had 3 really good pairs that you could trust in all situations. So if the Flames ended up loading up on right shot defense in their system, I honestly don't think that's a bad thing. The other thing I brought up here, so I posted this to Flames Nation a couple weeks ago, and I just looked at the last 20 years of 6 overall picks. And, it's definitely hit and miss. So that's why I'm saying the chances of the Flames getting a truly like franchise altering player is not very high when picking 6 overall, because over the last 20 years, the guys who I would truly consider those high end game changers, there's probably 2 of them that are already established in the NHL, and that's Matthew Tkachuk and Moritz Seider. And then, guys like TJ Ginla and Porter Martone and Dmitry Simashev, like those guys could be game changers, but we don't know quite yet. It's looking like Martone might be that guy based off the playoff he had and how he's playing at the Worlds right now. But that's 2 guys, let's call it from 2020 to 2006, about 14 years of drafts. There's 2 guys that have been picked that have been like real, big time game changers. So the Flames, in order to get that type of player, they're probably going to have to get a little lucky this year. And, I do see high ceilings for those guys that we mentioned who are going to be available at 6 for the Flames. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out. There's a bunch of different options there and different profiles of players. So it's going to be interesting to see, who Craig Conroy likes and who Todd Button likes here, because they definitely have their options here, and they're all very different players.
Yeah, and it's I just like the order they put in as well, right? And so they're going to have their nice pick there at 6 from a few different guys there. So it's not settling. We agree on that one. Not settling for who's going to be at 6. It's being aggressive for your guy at 6. And I really like that approach from Conroy. And I really hope that the Flames stick with the script, because next year's draft, we could be talking very similar conversation with guys who are projected to be at the top of that draft. So we'll cross that bridge a little bit later. Anything else draft talk wise? We'll continue going back to this topic. Obviously, we got 5.5 weeks still till the draft. Anything else in this draft talk before we move on here, Robert, that you wanted to bring up on the show here?
Maybe just, I really think it's important next year that the Flames finish as low in the standings as possible. I mean, you take a look at next year's draft, and you have Landon Dupont at the top, who looks like he's the next Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar. Like I think he is a truly franchise-altering player. And then there's also a bunch of big centers that are going to be available too. So I just think it's important that the Flames this year, once again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, don't go out there and make a big trade for a guy that can help you now. Just stick out this year, stick with the process, and be a bad team. Like, at least try to be a bad team, because they're still missing the franchise altering player. They're still missing the elite guy. And like we just said, I don't know if the Flames are going to be able to draft that player this year. So they're going to have to draft that player at some point, and they're probably going to need to draft 2 of them. And it's really hard to do that at 6 overall. I mean, if you just go back and take a look at first overall picks, second overall picks, and third overall picks from the last 20 years, they're basically every elite player in the NHL is there. Basically, let's say that there's 50 like elite players in the league. It feels like 35 to 40 of them you're picking in the top 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to find those players outside the top 3. Yes, you get a Johnny Gaudreau in the 4th round every now and then, or you get a Kaprizov in the 5th or 6th whenever he got picked. But it's just, you can't be putting all your chips in that basket. So I do hope next year that this team does bottom out, because there's a lot of intriguing players at the top of next year's draft, whether it's Alexei Joseph or Landon Dupont, those types of guys. I know there's a big Russian center too that's supposed to be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the types of players this franchise desperately needs if they want to get out of this thing. So I really hope that ends up happening next year.
There's like a negative notation on social media right now about team tank and about, losing doesn't always give you success. And people take to point to the draft lottery, how the Flames dropped 2 spots. But I think going into next year, it's not about being on team tank or whatever. On team being what is best for the organization. I think it would do a very good justice to this team to make sure they put them in a spot where they're picking that top 4. They're picking top 3 preferably, but make sure you're in that top 4 at the very minimum, to make sure that if you do drop in the draft lottery, that you're not dropping to 6. You're dropping, say, from 1 to 3 or 2 to 4. Make sure that you're put yourself in a position to get yourself one of those players, like Robert just mentioned there. There's a lot of good players coming, and that's where you're going to find your Nathan McKinnons, your Connor McDavids, your Jack Eichels, those players who can anchor your franchise and play alongside whoever you pick at 6. I think it's a very important couple of seasons here for the Flames in the way of building this roster. We got a lot of nice additional pieces and secondary pieces, and guys like Gridden are really nice for this team, but now you need to get yourself to your studs, your money makers, your anchors for your franchise. And how you do that? You got to draft them, and then you got to draft them high. It's not often you see Jack Eichel type trades happening in the National Hockey League. It's not all about the draft this offseason either for the Flames. This could be a nice pivotal moment for the Flames as well in the free agent market. Robert, a lot of free agents, both unrestricted and restricted. The Calgary Wranglers could look a heck of a lot different next season, and the Flames free agency list is an interesting one. Is there anyone on that unrestricted free agent list that jumps off the page at you that you say, hey, we have to re-sign this guy? Or are you okay letting the Jake Beans, the Olofsons, Kirklands, Bishops, Prospetovs go?
You know what? I was okay. So just to answer the initial question, the only guy that I would be willing to bring back is Ryan Lomberg. And it would be under the condition that the Flames, like I mentioned earlier, they end up moving out a couple forwards. And bringing back Ryan Lomberg for me has literally nothing to do with on the ice production, with the way he plays on the ice. I honestly, I wouldn't even care if he would play 10 games next year. I would be I would be re-signing Ryan Lomberg because of the personality, because of the influence that he can have in the locker room, the influence that he can have on the culture, making it a super positive environment. And during the next couple of years here, where the Flames, they're going to lose a lot of games. Like they look like they're probably going to be in the bottom 8 of the league for each of the next 2 seasons at least. And it could potentially be a difficult environment to come to work to, because you're not good enough to be a playoff team. So how do you get through those days, and how do you get through these years and months of losing hockey? Well, you do it through creating a positive work environment, a place where people can come to the hockey rink and have fun, and know that you're gonna go to the Dome, and you're gonna go to Scotia Place to work hard and practice and get better. But at the same time, you also know that you're gonna go there and have a good time, and you're gonna be surrounded by good teammates that are keeping things positive. And I really believe that Ryan Lomberg is that guy, and he is the perfect fit for a rebuilding team, a team in the situation the Flames are in right now. So that's the one guy I'd look to bring back. Once again, I don't care how much he plays. If he's a healthy scratch for 70 games, it does not matter to me. Just bring him back for the locker room. Outside of Lomberg, from an NHL perspective, there's not a single UFA or RFA, I would bring back. I mean, you take a look at the list. It's guys like Victor Olofsson, Johnny Beecher's an RFA. Jake Bean is a UFA. Got like Daniil Miramanov, Ivan Prisvetov, like those types of depth players. I'm not bringing any of them back. So from like a UFA RFA standpoint, looking at it through the Flames lens, not the Wranglers lens, but the Flames lens, it's going to be a pretty quiet offseason with not a lot of difficult decisions to make for Conroy.
Two names to throw at you there. I'm quite with you there. I kind of hope there is a lot of turnover with the UFAs and RFAs going out the door. Let guys go out, and because you got a whole slew of players coming in. The two names that stick out to me on the restricted free agency list, and maybe this is more of a Wrangler conversation. First one is, do you re-sign Rory Cairns? And what about Brendan Othman? What do you think of him as well?
Yeah, I think you 100% bring Othman back. Because you made the trade for him, you gave up Jacob Battaglia for him, and I mean, who knows what he's going to be, but you still gave up like a guy you picked in the second round. So yeah, you definitely want to bring back Othman, on a two-way deal, and maybe he does turn into a fourth line NHL player by the end of the year. Like, that could definitely be the case. And then Cairns is a really interesting one. Where are you at on Cairns? I'd be curious to hear what you have to say.
I really wish I knew what he was at the NHL level. We completely.
That's why it's so confusing.
For me, this is a very much a Matthew Phillips situation of you're not really sure what he is, and you wish that the coach gave you an opportunity to see what he is. He may not be an NHL player, but at the same time, he might end up being a third liner somewhere, and you just don't know. So for me, I would be inclined to maybe bring him back, but then again, you look at the gluttony of forwards the Flames have. Can you bring him back and give him a legitimate shot at being a guy you play in the National Hockey League for more than 8 minutes for a couple times of the year? So it's an interesting one. So if you're going to bring him back and you can get him on a good deal, he will require waivers to go down next year as well. And so if you're going to commit to Rory Cairns for another season, it's got to be almost committing to him at an NHL level. And are you willing to put that level of commitment to a player when you already have that many forwards signed? So it's an interesting one. I personally don't think I would, based on what we've seen from him. But again, that's an unfair shake to Rory Cairns because we really haven't had a chance to see what he is. So you've added Gross, you've added Castagna to the list of players that are going to get an opportunity next year. You have those 15 forwards that you talked about earlier in the show. I just don't think he's going to get a fair shake. And so for the sake of him, maybe it is time to let him go and explore elsewhere and maybe get an opportunity somewhere else. So it's an interesting name, and that's why I brought it up on the show, because I really don't know where to go, Robert, with that one.
It's a good point you make. I mean, I think from my perspective, if you were to bring him back, I would view it as you're going to bring him back for the American League, because, like I mentioned, the spots on the wing in the top 9 are completely taken. I think Ryan Huska does not think Rory Cairns is a center long term, so he's got to find a spot on the wing. He's not going to play on the fourth line, and then, like I said, the wings in the top 9 of the Flames lineup are completely taken, and he's been passed by Matt Vigridin. He's been passed by Sam Honzig. Mm-hmm. I would argue he's probably been passed by Idar Suniev. There's no space for him. So if you're going to bring him back, I would say it's probably from a standpoint of getting the American League team back on its feet. And that would be huge for the Wranglers to get him back next year, because he's a very good, productive AHL player. I mean, he's essentially like a point per game AHL player. And, as we all know, the Wranglers were awful this year, and it's not completely their fault. I mean, the Flames raided their team this year. They lost Solovyov on waivers. So yeah, like they got raided this year. So they need to regroup, and having Rory Cairns at the top of the lineup, playing on the wing or center alongside a couple younger guys, I think makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, if there's an NHL team out there who thinks Rory is an NHL player and can play every night in the league, then I'd love to see him get that opportunity. But at the same time, I would like to see him, help out the Wranglers next year and get them back on track.
From a Wranglers perspective, what do you make of William Stromgren? He was a player that was drafted right around where people wanted them to take Stankoven, and they didn't, and they took William Stromgren as well, and they kind of pumped his tires for a bit. Where are we at with William Stromgren? Because he's another RFA for the Flames, and wonder if he's looking for another opportunity himself.
Yeah, I would be down to bring him back on a two-way deal. I once again, the whole winger argument that I just made against Cairns does apply to Stromgren. So once again, this is more of an AHL move, and I think Stromgren's proven that he's a really good AHL player and can put up points and produce offense. So I'd like to see him back down with the Wranglers, but I think the days of hoping that he's an NHL player are pretty much over. Based off of his recall this year where he barely got an opportunity to play. Ryan Huska clearly did not trust him, did not want him in the lineup. And yeah, there's just so many forwards. And then, like I said, Wittenbach, Potter, Reshny are all going to be arriving at the end of the year. There's too many guys that have passed him from an NHL perspective, but yeah, I'd like to see him stay with the Wranglers for sure.
Outside of that RFA list, that UFA list is pretty bleak. It's pretty much full of guys. And I think with the amount of players, and you listed off a few of them there that are coming to play with the Wranglers next season, I think this is a good opportunity for not only the NHL team to kind of reset a little bit with very little moves, that the AHL team can kind of reset, restructure themselves a bit here to move forward to be a better development team for the Flames. They were ransacked this year by the Flames, especially on the back end with guys like Ristevich and Kuznetsov coming through and getting full-time NHL jobs. And so it's hard to put together a good AHL team when you keep getting your ransacked from your NHL club. So good. I think it's a good offseason for the Wranglers to reset here a little bit, bring in a new crop of guys and see who else they can develop into NHLers. I think it's good. I think Sutter down there doing a good job coaching as well. So it's an important offseason for the Wranglers, in my opinion. Anything else on that free agent Flame conversation before we move towards the larger free agency talk here?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, just the other guys we got to keep in mind, and you mentioned Tyson Gross and Jonathan Castagna. I mean, Gross might end up being the fourth line center in the NHL, but if he were to start his career in the AHL, I'd have no issue with that. So you got him down the middle. You got Castagna down the middle. Andrew Basha is going to be joining the Wranglers full time after a really successful stint with the Tigers this season. Does a guy like Henry Muse end up signing, out of Michigan at the end of this season? Is there another defenseman there? Etienne Morin's probably going to want to transition to become a full-time AHL player. Axel Hertig's in the mix. So, I mean, I look at, a guy like Artem Grushnikov is probably not going to be re-signed. I look at a guy like Parker Bell. He's probably not going to be re-signed. Carter King, I'm not so sure about. Lucas Siona, I'm not so sure about. Sam Morton. Like, there's a few guys there who are definitely on the edge there of making the team or not next year. So yeah, there's going to be some tough decisions that Brad Pascal and Sutter are going to have to make.
Yeah. Let's talk broader. July 1st comes around. You're beside Craig Conroy. What are you telling Craig Conroy when his phone starts ringing July 1st? Because for me, we can completely honest and blunt here. My point's really easy. I hope Conroy loses his phone for about 48 hours starting July 1st.
Yeah, if I were Conroy, I'd throw on my skate and I'd put my phone on the ground and I would just start stomping it as hard as I can. Break that phone into 10,000 pieces, throw it in the Elbow River, just get it as far away from Conroy as possible. This Flames team is not in a position whatsoever to be making any sort of free agent signings. I mean, especially ones that are going to be 3+ years and, $3 to $4+ million per year. I just don't think that makes sense for this group. I mean, the one position that I think they could use is if they end up not re-signing Ryan Lomberg, I do wonder if they're going to want to bring in someone for some toughness, just a guy you can throw in the lineup every now and then just to, kind of protect some of the young players. And this is just me. If your team is not going to be good and you're going to be losing a lot of games, I understand they're going to be losing games on the scoreboard, but I don't want them losing games from like an intimidation or toughness perspective. I think it's the worst when you're watching your favorite team and not only are they losing on the scoreboard, but they're getting bullied at the same time. and they're getting out hit and they're getting out muscled and all that kind of stuff. So there is a world where I wouldn't mind seeing Craig Conroy go out and look to bring in basically an enforcer, whether that's a Ryan Reeves or Ross Johnson. And once again, the Flames, they're not in a position to win next year. Mm-hmm. These players, if they play 10 games, then they play 10 games, but just to have that presence in the locker room, and if something stupid happens, that someone's got your back. I personally do like that when you're rebuilding. So that might be a position that Craig Conroy and the management team look at just to get a little bit tougher. But outside of that, they're set on D, they're set in net, they're essentially set up front for the most part here. So the only thing I can really think of is maybe they bring in a tough kind of enforcer on a 1-year contract kind of thing.
I wonder if we can get Brad Pascal and Mrs. Conroy to team up and change Craig's number. Let Brad handle all the AHL Wrangler stuff that needs to get handled over that course of that week, and just let Craig Conroy think that no one's calling, that no one's answering his phone calls, and maybe we'll just have a nice, smooth July 1st and 2nd without any weird moves coming. And then they can find that enforcer that you mentioned there, Robert, on day 5 or 6 of free agency after all the awful contracts are handed out. It's not to say that Craig Conroy is a bad GM, but it's just it's almost like they can't help themselves when it comes to seeing cap space, money, and guys they can sign. These GMs tend to lose their minds. I love what Brian Burke always says about free agency. That's the day where the player GMs like to make the biggest mistakes in building hockey clubs, and it's just don't be throwing that money around. It's okay. We just went through the list of free agents that we wouldn't like them to re-sign. If you're really itching to re-sign someone, re-sign that Ryan Longberg contract. Reach out to your kids in the minor leagues and re-sign some of these Wranglers and do the in-house stuff. We don't need to be bringing in 3 or 4 other players and giving more competition already in-house to these younger players coming in. Trust your own process is what I'm kind of getting at here. Your process has been draft, develop, and have internal competition. Don't go muddy that up by signing, say, McCarron's a guy out of Minnesota that a lot of people are talking about. Don't go out and sign him to a 5x5 contract just to have another guy in-house. I really hope they stay the course here and allow these younger players to have an opportunity to show that they are ready for those roles. Let Castagna and Gross battle out to be a 4th-line center. Let a guy who maybe we're not even thinking about come to camp and battle for a position higher in the lineup or to make the NHL club. Let Sam Honzik and Connor Zary battle out who's going to be the left winger for Michael Backlund. Those kind of competition things is more what I'd be looking for rather than signing a guy like, say, McCarron, just to use a name, to come in here and help bolster this roster. So I'm with you there, Robert. We'll get on the phone here to Mr. Pascal and see if he and Miss Conroy can change that phone number for Craig.
What do you think of my take on adding toughness? Do I sound like I'm 1,000 years old, or do you think I'm onto something potentially there?
Well, yeah, you do sound 1,000 years old, but I still think that kind of thinking is valid in the National Hockey League. You are going to, it's human mentality. You see younger and quote unquote weaker players, you're going to go pick on them. You're going to go poke the bear. Oh, look, it's Zane Parekh. Last year we could knock him off the puck really easy. What if we just go poke him a little harder this year, a little bit more this season? Well, if he's got a guy, on that bench, say it is Ryan Lomberg, who will push back and protect that player, maybe people leave Parekh alone a little bit more, or not go at him as hard, knowing that they're going to also take the brunt end of a beating later in the game. So it is a little more old school thinking to have a tough guy on the roster, but you need to be tough to play against. And if you have all finesse guys, you're going to get pushed around at the end of the day. And so it is 100-year-old man speak, but I think it's also very valid speak.
But from my perspective, intimidation is still part of hockey. Fighting is still part of hockey. Physicality is still part of hockey. And when I take a look at this Flames lineup here, so let's say a game gets stupid, and that does happen. It happens usually probably anywhere from 3 to 5 times a year in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, it happens all the time. Who in this Flames lineup, and let's assume Ryan Lomberg is not re-signed, and that's what it sounds like is going to happen. Who's going to step up? Adam Klapka is physically imposing with just pure size, but he is not an intimidating person from a fighting perspective. You just watch any tape of him fight, and you can see that he doesn't really know what he's doing yet. And sure, he can improve on that skill, but he's not gonna really strike the fear of God into anybody. Martin Pospisil, you desperately do not want him to fight. And plus, I don't even think he's going to be a regular in the lineup every day next year. And you look at the top 9, none of those guys are truly tough. You look on defense, none of those guys are like truly tough guys. Kevin Ball, once again, bigger guy, but do you want him fighting? No. So like I said, I just like the idea of, when you have younger skilled players in your lineup, and if they're getting picked on, if they're getting bullied, I like the idea of having someone step up and fight, or send a message to the other team that this is not acceptable. Like that one game, it was after the Olympic break. The Flames played Anaheim at home, and Zane Parekh got hit hard 5 or 6 times. And I was watching that, and I'm just like, can somebody step up and defend this guy? Can somebody just step in and send a message to the other team that if you touch Zane, then we're going to go after your best player, or there's going to be a fight, or we're going to start hitting too. Like, somebody do something. This is your prized possession. He's 19 years old and he's getting his ass kicked out here. Like, somebody step up. And yeah, I just hate the idea of you're losing on the scoreboard and you're losing from like an intimidation standpoint. You're getting pushed around. I hate that as a hockey fan. So like, I'm just looking at some of the UFAs here that the Flames could potentially target if they want to go down this road. But Nicholas Deslauriers in Carolina is going to be a free agent. Ryan Reeves, Curtis Douglas, Scott Sabrin, Ross Johnson, and then there's still Lomberg too. Maybe just one of those guys, and once again, you don't play him every night. He's not taking a spot from a young player. He's just a role guy. But maybe just have that guy on your bench, have him in your system and in your organization, and just be there to do a little bit of protecting for some of these young guys. I personally think that's important.
And you look at the teams that are winning right now. Look at the games when they're playing when it's out of control. Like, go look at the Montreal Buffalo series. And, the team that was losing in that third period, just what do they start doing? They started running at you. They started trying to setting the tone for the next game. And I know we're talking apples to oranges here where the Flames are in their cycle, but if you want to be a winner, you still have to be a tough team, and the tough teams win. The Avalanche don't get pushed around. They do the pushing because they're not intimidated by anybody. Carolina, very much the same way. They're not intimidated by anybody. Those teams that are intimidated are in the draft lottery because they don't have that around them. So I think it's very important to, one, protect your young players, and 2, it helps teach those young players how to be tougher to play against. And so I think it's a very valid point by you, Robert. And we're not, and to back up Robert here, he's not talking, go get yourself the old Brian McGrattan. I'm going to fight, 50 times a year. I'm going to play my 8 minutes on the fourth line and maybe hurt someone. We're talking about a smart player that plays in key situations, help protect your younger players, and help set the tone for other games. Like, it's a different type of role. It's still the enforcer role, but it's a different type of role than what it was back in the 90s and early 2000s. So it's a good point.
And a lot of these guys that I'm talking about are great in the locker room too. You just listen to guys who get interviewed on podcasts, and you read different articles where former players are getting interviewed, and whenever they're asked about, guys who basically play that enforcer role, basically 10 times out of 10, all they talk about is like what a great personality they were and how awesome they were in the locker room. And once again, on a team that's going to be rebuilding, it's going to be doing a lot of losing. You do need to have a good culture, and you need to have a place where players can come in and have fun while also working hard and improving at the same time. And I just think this team and this situation could turn miserable. And I think that would be dangerous when you're trying to develop and add a lot of different young players to your lineup. I think you need to manage that very carefully if you're Craig Conroy. And I do think these types of players help in that situation. And once again, this is like you sign them to a 1-year deal, you play them maybe 25, 30 games. It's not any sort of significant transaction. And hell, we're talking about Team Tank here. These guys do hurt you on the ice. Like these players, they're not very good 5-on-5 players. That's also not a bad thing for where the Flames are right now. So I guess there's a couple different benefits there.
All right, so Robert advocating for a 4x4 for Ryan Reeves for 82 on the top line. Beside, no, just kidding. It's good. It's a good point. This for me, this is a very important off season for a couple of reasons. Why I think the Flames are happy that it's a quiet off season, a quieter off season. I think they have an opportunity in free agency, both with the UFAs and RFAs, to maybe just change over a few things and get a new crop of these younger players coming into the lineup. And they have a very important draft ahead of them here this offseason. I think this could be a draft to help set them up to really help this rebuild move along in a good, positive manner. I'm excited to see how it unfolds. I'm glad it's going to be a quieter offseason, as much as I miss having something to talk about at the water cooler at work or around the Calgary Flames. But after the past couple of noisy off seasons and the have-to-do list that Conroy had, it's kind of nice to have having no have to do a list other than just make sure you nail this draft. So it's going to be a good offseason. It's an important offseason, Robert. And so for you, any final thoughts that you have on this offseason that we haven't mentioned yet? Because I think it should be a good one for the Flames as well as being an important one.
Yeah, I guess I would just say once again, just be patient, stick with it. There's talk about potentially using some of your draft picks to go out and make a trade for a younger player like they did with Frost and Farabee. I don't think this is the time to do that. I think that's a trade you make 2 years from now, not this year. Because I mean, you take a look at the Frost and Farabee trade. By the time those guys' contracts expire, they're going to be 28, 29 years old. And all of a sudden you're going to have to re-sign them, into their 30s. And that's right when you're starting to hopefully turn a corner and become a competitive team. Do you want to be spending a lot of money on middle six forwards that are going to be in their 30s when you already have Huberdeau and Sharangovich signed? Those are the types of things I worry about. Say you acquire a 24-year-old forward this year. It takes 4 years for you to turn things around. All of a sudden that player's 28, needs a new contract, and you've lost all value. So I would just say, don't make those trades right now. Like I said, make those 2 or 3 years from now when you are set to turn the corner and become a legit contender, and take advantage of the time where those players are just entering their prime and they're still on good contracts. You're not spending, UFA years on them. You're not spending big money on them. Like that's what I hope happens. Like basically the offseason that happened last year is kind of what I hope happens this year. Cause like basically nothing happened last offseason. And I think the Flames are in a position now where the same thing needs to happen this year.
I just thought of something, Robert, I didn't brought up yet. To add to my quiet offseason, please stay away from the offer sheet conversation as well.
Oh, God.
I just thought of that as I was talking. You were talking about trading for a younger player, and my mind jumped to Mason McTavish because you've been hearing those rumors that is he happy in Anaheim, and it brought back the last year's conversation about how people wanted us to offer sheet Mason McTavish. I think right now, if you're the Flames, I think offer sheet that conversation should be buried for a long time, because you're talking about spending assets that you need for your rebuild on a maybe player that another franchise is struggling to sign. So I know where you lie on offer sheets, but I forgot to bring that up on the podcast. So I figured I'd throw that in there at the end here real quick. Offer sheets, stay away.
Yeah, that's a move. Once again, if you want to go down that road, that's a move you make years from now, not now. Even like, here's one interesting name that you can throw out there when it comes to an offer sheet, and it's Maverick Bourque in Dallas, because they're in salary cap hell. They need to sign Jason Robertson. He's looking probably at over $10 million a year. You still have Sagan. You still have Ben. You just added Tyler Myers' salary, which was one of the worst trades that was made all year, bringing Tyler Myers to Dallas. He was a healthy scratch in their last game of the season. It's just bizarre they made that move. But anyway, they're in cap hell. So that could be a guy you target, and maybe you offer him, $4 million, and then you only give up a second round pick. That might be kind of interesting, but at the same time, like I just mentioned, I still think that's the type of move you make a couple years from now. But like, where would you be at on like a Maverick Bourque style offer sheet?
No, I'm just flat out no. If you're gonna do that, we just talked in the podcast a couple of times about how full the stables are with players, the NHL players. If you're gonna make a move for that younger player, I think it'd be better off trading and making that type of move. Say you trade for Maverick Bourque and you send out an asset, and you see a better. Say it's and this isn't going to happen, guys, and I'm not saying one for one, but say it is a Connor Zary for Maverick Bork conversation. You're just changing out some players for the fit, for the opportunity. Something like that, for me, in my opinion, makes more sense than trying to offer sheet a guy. And I'm with you. Offer sheets, this point of your rebuild, don't make a lot of sense unless it's a foundational piece. And if it's a foundational piece, I'm pretty sure you're not going to get them through offer sheet anyways.
Yeah. The interesting thing with Bork, like, I just pulled up his Hockey DB page. He put up 41 points in 82 games this year, and I don't think he had like a fantastic role on the team. I think he was playing in Dallas's bottom six for the majority of the season. I mean, that's kind of an interesting case. If you can move out of 2 or 3 forwards and then maybe make a deal for a Bork, maybe that's something I could get behind. But once again, like, he's 24 years old. I just worry that, once again, by the time the Flames are actually good again, he's going to be 28, 29 years old, and he's going to be a pending UFA, and he's going to need huge money. And right when you're about to turn the corner. So I guess, I'm kind of talking myself into a loop here, but, I would say stay away from that type of move. Even if it is a Maverick Bork kind of thing, stay away from it right now.
And is he really an upgrade on what you have in house? Like I just talked about with Connor there. Is he a clear upgrade? So you're going to go out and spend all these assets for a maybe. Just, if you're going to do that, make a trade and make it worth your while. Make sure you've done your research. Just offer sheets to me just don't make any sense for the most part, especially when you're rebuilding. And so I'd stay away from those moves. So I just thought I'd bring that up there, Robert.
He also just makes your team unnecessarily better for the next couple years. Like, just kind of like Frost and Farabee have done. Those are the types of players that I think keep you out of picking first overall or finishing, 32nd or 31st in the league. So if the goal is to bottom out here, then adding a guy like Bork, who's actually going to make your team better, once again, that's another reason why it doesn't make sense right now. And he's another 5'11" forward. Like, the one thing, I don't know if you noticed this too, but a lot of these Flames forwards, particularly like their younger guys in their prospect system, they're not very big. Like, I wonder when the day comes when they make the playoffs again, are they going to get run out of the building because of their size? It's something I think the Flames need to keep in mind here a little bit.
You're going to get yelled at by the size police on Twitter now.
Hey, listen, I'm all for like a few smaller guys in your lineup, but I don't think your entire forward group can be composed of them.
I agree. And I have other takes on that. I won't share on the podcast, but I'm sure people have heard them from me before. Anything else you want to bring up here on the podcast, Robert? If not, where can the Flame fans find you? And what are you doing on flamesnation.ca next?
Yeah, I'll shut up now. All my off-season thoughts are done now. No, yeah, just follow me at Ring of Fire CGY, and we're trying to put out some fun historical content on Flames Nation and lots of draft coverage. So yeah, be sure to check that out.
Off-season is not a time for the conversation to stop. As Robert and I just proved with an hour-long podcast, there's lots to talk about and discuss around the Flames still. Lots more from us coming up next week on the show, so stay tuned and make sure that you continue to follow us across social media. I am Vintage Johnny 84. He is Ring of Fire CGY. And of course, the show is Red Mile Rundown. We appreciate you. We thank you. Enjoy the conference championships coming up in the National Hockey League this week. I'm looking forward to those. And we'll chat more about that next week on the show as well, I'm sure. Enjoy your weeks. Be good and enjoy the snow, Robert.